Most people think they know who they want to be, but their actions and their thoughts or their words are very incongruent. So I'll give you a common example. Most people, most entrepreneurs, leaders, CEOs, they'll say that they're family men and women, that their wife, their husband, their kids are most important. But all you have to do to really validate that is open their calendar. Is date night on their calendar? Is time with their children on their calendar? Is time for their self-care, the gym, massage, whatever it may be? Is that on their calendar? No, it's swamped with work meetings, networking events, this, that, and the other. So there's just a massive misalignment that's often present.
Welcome to the Richer Soul podcast, where we share how to live in harmony across health, wealth, time, relationships, and spirituality. How do you bring them all together to live your ultimate life? The best thing is we've got nothing to sell, just great advice from people who've succeeded and lived that dream. Welcome to Richer Soul, Paul Salter. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to dive in.
We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I think I learned how to write a check in school. Outside of that, absolutely nothing. Growing up, what I learned was there was never enough, and those who had a lot of money earned it in an unfair way, perhaps, or maybe they weren't the kindest or most respected people in the neighborhood.
Interesting. Was that just a pervasive? That's interesting because they were in the neighborhood. So was that your family belief or was that a wider belief?
I want to say family because I can speak most, confidently about that. But I think I look back, like I grew up in a nice house. I'm the oldest of four. There's four children running around. There's 5 bedrooms. It's a good size house. But what I do remember is we were the first people to move into this house. We moved in when I was probably 3 years old. But as I entered elementary school or right around middle school, a whole new development next to mine was in the process of being finished. Those houses were next level. They were significantly larger. So I don't know if it's a little bit of suddenly I went from big fish in a small pond family mentality to small fish in a big pond.
That would make sense.
Yeah. And I'll add
Go
one
ahead.
more thing, Rocky, too. You added the equation as well. My dad worked a 100% commission job. So just that undercurrent of financial stress and anxiety was always present in the background. And, for a while I was unaware of it, though I'm beginning to already pick up unconsciously on that from a young age. But he worked in that job for 30 years. So that's all I ever knew. And as I got older, he just simply had more mouths to feed.
Was it a roller coaster for him or was it more consistent in that type of a position?
In hindsight, I feel it was consistent in a roller coaster upwards. I think he continued to do better and better, but there's the 2000 .com burst, this 07, 08 housing collapse that I can even reflect back now and start to put words and fragmented images to mind about, I do remember this, or I remember times I grew up having everything I needed and most of what I wanted, but there were some moments of very contentious conversations I remember either hearing my parents have or direct no's, you can't have that, we can't get that, in my childhood.
Interesting. Did those beliefs follow you into adulthood?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up, so I've been coaching an entrepreneur this is year 17 for me. And the majority of the first probably 10 years, I was rewarded very quickly for my work ethic. It was a very input output type of scenario. The more I worked, the more money I made. It was great. Why not work all of the time? There was still never enough. And as I hit one milestone, one goal after the next, I never felt safe slowing down because what if tomorrow I lost it all? Was it logical? Was it rational? Was it realistic? Absolutely not. But there was always this undercurrent of fear from a place of a scarcity mindset that was present that did not allow me to truly slow down, be present, and enjoy what my hard work had actually afforded me.
It's interesting you knew that and you're aware of that. What do you think was the driver of the fear, though?
The fear of losing it all?
Yeah.
I think I unconsciously picked it up as a kid. I mean, my dad was one of 8. So he just lived off hand-me-downs. And only his dad worked. His mom was a stay-at-home mom. So there was never enough there. And I think just generationally, these beliefs and emotions around money are just unconsciously passed. And for me, I saw family members or friends make some very poor decisions around their finances and have to deal with the consequences. And I think because my dad had this 100% commission based job, that fear was always alive and well in him. And sure, it propelled him and fueled him in many instances. But I have an imagination now. There were some quiet moments alone at night where it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, it's funny that the things that drive us forward are the same things that hold us back.
You're speaking my language. I mean, that's what I do in my coaching now. And I tell my clients all the time, specifically like your ambition, your tenacity, your work ethic, it's a superpower. Inevitably, though, it will become your kryptonite. And your goal is to learn how to calibrate the intensity of said skill so you can achieve success in a sustainable manner.
Those beliefs, at what point did it shift for you that you were able to let go, or are you still holding them?
Great question. So, funny enough, about seven years ago, my coaching business was in a very good place, and I always had this irrepressible passion for the game of poker. So I started playing poker professionally, and about 6 months in, I thought I was out working, out studying everybody, doing all of the right things, but it still felt like I was lighting money on fire. Not quite ready to give up, I hired a mindset and performance coach who happened to be a hypnotherapist. And very quickly, we unearthed all of my limiting beliefs around money, my scarcity mindset, my intense fear of loss. So it was the poker table that really shined a bright light on these deficiencies, these areas for growth. And my relationship with money today is a night and day difference. But it really held me back, not only on the poker table, but in my coaching business for a long time.
So the coach brought it to your awareness. How quickly were you able to shift or to let go? Or was it a process or like snap of a finger?
Gradual process with a few snap of finger accelerants, if you will. So the biggest clicking for me, this is interesting, and I love that we get to have this conversation because I've done a lot of work on my money beliefs. For me, there was a 5-year period of time in my coaching business where plus or minus like $10,000, I made the same exact amount of money, like eerily so. And the only things that changed during these 5 years was and the goal was always make more and more. But the only thing that increased that time was the number of hours worked and the amount of financial stress and anxiety I experienced. And through working with my coach, I was able to identify, I had this memory where I saw how much my dad made one year because he had to fill out the financial aid form for college. And if you took that amount and you added it to what I estimated my mom made, that was literally the financial ceiling I kept running into. And through some deep work, I was able to begin articulating it didn't feel right or safe to out earn my parents. How dare I do that? They made so many sacrifices. They provided so much for me. It's almost like I had this belief it was disrespectful to outperform them financially. And it wasn't until, it sounds irrational. I can joke about it now, but that's how the mind works. It's incredibly irrational. And it wasn't until I began to reframe and let go of that I was able to leapfrog to that next tier.
You didn't think your parents wanted you to be more successful than them?
Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's usually what parents want. So I was wondering if there was a disconnect in the way you looked at it versus them, or it was something else.
They were my biggest supporters. Now, not without some misunderstanding. Like I told you, my dad was in the same job for 30 years. I left my last corporate job after like 18 months there and then fully went out on my own. And it was a big, you don't do that. You stay at a job for 5 years, then you get promoted, blah, blah, blah. So there was definitely some misunderstandings. But what was interesting was one time I told my dad how much I made in one of those early years. I can still picture his reaction on his face. And it wasn't pride. It was kind of more of an shit. I don't know if I can cuss on your show, but it was almost like shock, disbelief, hurt versus pride, support, encouragement. And I could have misinterpreted his whole reaction for all I know, but that's just what I internalized, which I think further validated that deep-seated belief that I held.
Did you ever go back and have that conversation?
I have not. They know I'm doing well, and I just keep it at that.
You know what? As a dad of a kid who does well, I think part of it, what I've learned is you start to get into income tracks. And I started at a fraction, like, we start and then we grow. But when the new people come in, they don't come in that far behind because the expectation is different. And so as an adult, you're going, wait a minute, I killed myself my whole life. And he's starting out and he's able to do that. And it's not so much the looking at you, it's like, what the hell happened to me?
Yeah. So that's interesting. So I'm a father. I have an 18-month-old. So
Yeah. You
on
don't have
one
to
hand,
worry yet.
well, so yes and no. It's interesting you say that. I don't worry, but as much as like I want to make sure that I am exuding that abundance and really, embodying a healthy relationship with money so I can lay that groundwork and foundation. And I want to be his biggest cheerleader and advocate. Go make as much money as you can while making such a beautiful impact and having such a positive light in life. But yeah, by all means, there's always enough. And whatever it is you want to do, you can find a way to monetize it.
You can. I think there are 18-month-olds who might be making more than you, but their
Probably.
parents helped out a little.
YouTube's crazy.
YouTube is crazy. The world is crazy, and it is what it is. What made you jump into the entrepreneurial space at a young age? Because you went into a very uncertain place, and it didn't sound like that was.
I think for a long time, I just rebelled against structure and people telling me what to do. I mean, growing up, I had the traditional grass cutting businesses and I made good money. Like, I don't know if I just had really kind neighbors or what, but I was paid like what I thought was more than the average middle school and high schooler getting paid to cut yards. And that just fueled me. I had a woman in my neighborhood who paid me what I felt was a stupid amount of money to babysit her kids. So just a quick infatuation with, oh my goodness, there's a lot of potential to make money. And I didn't want to do it on my parents' terms. My dad made me work at his office in the summers for a couple of years. And it was just doing the grunt work of a printing press warehouse, getting paid minimum wage. And it was like contrasting that versus I can go cut 2 yards and make $100. Like that's how much I didn't even make that much in an 8 or 9 hour day at the paper place. So I was quickly made aware of there was opportunity out there. And I just started trying any and every little thing I could to make extra cash. And at 17, that turned into getting, my personal trainer certification, starting to be a personal trainer, group fitness instructor as I went into college, because I could do it on my own time, charge my own dime, and have that level of control. I think for me, control is something I've always gravitated towards. So being able to control my schedule, who I work with, when I work was very appealing. And I took that and ran with it.
That's awesome. And it's funny. I think you can tell what kids are going to do that at a young age because they figure out how to go make money in some other areas. But I will say, and because the same thing happens to me when I was younger, you undervalue how much money that is, meaning you think it's a lot. In reality, it's not a ton, right? But we don't have that lens to go, oh yeah, that's really not a big deal to them. To me, it's a massive deal. And so it's kind of that shift. So you go out, you leave that, you start. Now, what kind of coaching were you doing when you first left?
So when I first got into it, it was all personal training, group fitness, and that evolved in some of the online coaching world, building workout plans, building nutrition plans. I got my degree in dietetics, became a registered dietitian. So then it evolved into I'm a sports dietitian, working at the collegiate and professional and Olympic level, helping these top tier athletes maximize their performance. And then from there, what was always unique about my coaching is I realized very early on, everybody I was working with, they knew how to make healthy eating choices. It wasn't like I was opening up this whole incredible new vast amount of knowledge to them. They already knew what to be doing, but they weren't doing it. So that was indicative to me that it was more of a mindset problem, more of an emotion, a belief problem, rather than a lack of knowledge problem. And that's what began to kind of evolve my coaching moving forward.
So what is that issue? What prevents people who have the knowledge, who actually want to do the thing, but don't do it?
How much time do you have?
We've got, as long as you can stay.
So at the core, we can get into all of these sabotaging behaviors. There's procrastination, perfectionism, and things like that. We can go a level deeper and say fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of embarrassment, success, abandonment. But below that, what I have identified working with thousands of people is it always comes back to the core belief, am I worthy? Am I deserving? Am I capable enough? So it's interesting in the weight loss space in particular. So I spent 10 or so years primarily working with women stuck in the yo-yo dieting cycle, losing and regaining the same 20 to 40 pounds year after year. And This day and age, it's very easy to forget that we are a tribal species who is wired to belong, to connect, and be accepted. Because thousands of years ago, if we were judged, rejected, or abandoned, well, we literally died. And although that same outcome is not nearly as likely today, the threat of being abandoned or left out is still as visceral and real as ever before. So we talk about some of my clients, these women who were overweight and built their life around a series of unhealthy habits. Well, if you looked at their inner circle, the 5 people they spent the most time with, they were relying on fast food, they were binging Netflix, had unhealthy eating habits. So the moment that woman would start to sacrifice the Thursday wine nights, sacrifice the Friday girls' nights out for meal planning, for getting up early to go to the gym, she starts to make a little progress. And suddenly she starts getting some of those backhanded compliments from her friends. Must be nice, a little jealousy, a little envy, a little resentment grows stronger and stronger, to the point she feels unsafe standing out, putting her needs first. So slowly but surely, she begins to regress so that she feels like she belongs to her tribe again.
It's a good thing your neighbors didn't hear your family. That's interesting. Yeah, you are the average of the 5 people around you. And so, does it then just make sense that if you're going to do this, find a group of people who are also going to do it with you and you do the journey together? Does that solve it, or is there more to it than just that?
There's more to it, but that's a huge component. I dug into a lot of research out of Harvard, out of Stanford around weight loss communities, specifically with women. And don't quote me on these numbers, but there were a couple studies that I reviewed that was between 57 and 74% of women did not feel supported in their weight loss goals and reported trying to do it alone. There was just a lack of community, a lack of help. And again, it comes back to us being a community centric species. That community is so valuable for accountability, relatability, to prevent feelings of isolation. It is the fast track to picking us up when we get knocked down by life, which will inevitably happen.
Interesting. So, you're not doing that now. What happened next? You evolved from that to something else?
Yeah, so coming back, the poker happened at the towards the conclusion of the nutrition coaching career, and it really dawned on me that hypnotherapy had such a profound impact on my life. It was an aha moment to walk away from poker. I was already doing a lot of mindset coaching intertwined with the nutrition. So I phased out all the nutrition coaching, doubled down on the mindset coaching, got my credential as a hypnotherapist. So today, I'm a high performance hypnotherapist and mindset coach specifically for CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and ambitious professionals who are stuck in a pattern of getting in their own way, falling victim to these destructive patterns of believing, feeling, thinking, and behaving that are keeping them from their potential.
Do you find that these high performing people accept hypnotherapy, or is there an issue there? Like, are they welcoming of it? Because it's not always accepted.
It's a great question. Hypnosis, whenever I talk about it, I always have to lead with education because most people think, I'm going to dangle a pocket watch in front of you, get you to cluck like a chicken, put you to sleep because they think they've seen something on a cruise ship, a comedy show. And although all of that's hypnosis, I don't want to take away from those practitioners and performers. It's unlike anything I do. So, candidly, the vast majority of my clients, I am more or less a last resort. They've tried a lot of other means, tactics, strategies, styles of coaching, but the results they've been looking for either haven't been achieved or haven't stuck. Hypnosis offers a fast, safe, research backed, and effective way to get to the core of what's actually holding them back: a lack of belief, a fear, a destructive mindset program. And it allows us to quickly nip that in the bud so they can get out of their own way and go forward. So, bringing it back to the question at hand, someone has heard of me at this point. They don't just hear me once and suddenly say, that's the guy that's going to change my life. There's a warming up period. That's why I have a podcast. I'm active on social media, and I'm always trying to lead with education and demystifying and debunking some of the myths. It's not mind control. It's not brainwashing. I don't extract your deepest, darkest secrets. And in fact, most people rather don't know, Rocky, hypnosis is a natural state of mind. You've been in it multiple times today. I have, everybody listening. It's simply a word to describe a type of brainwave we're producing in any given moment. It's the same state of mind we're in the moment we transition from waking or from sleeping to waking, when we're caught up in a good book, binging our favorite TV show, or lost in that flow state while working on something we love.
Interesting. And that makes a lot of sense. They've already tried a lot. Nothing else
Mhm.
has worked. So it's something else to try. And I get that. And I'm from what I know, it's not a long process, meaning you don't need to commit to forever. It's something that you can work with relatively quickly, and you can at least start to see results. If you don't see results, then you know, hey, this isn't for me, and you move on to the next thing. When people come to you, are there certain issues that always tend to pop up?
Again, those three core beliefs: am I worthy, deserving, and capable? The way that I like to think, everything comes back to a belief, because a belief is nothing more than a lens through which we see the world. It's our filter around what decisions we make and what actions we take. And I always say we have four core beliefs. We have beliefs about ourselves, again, worthy, deserving, capable, yes or no. We have beliefs about life. Is life fair or unfair, happening to us, happening for us? We have beliefs about others. Is it safe to trust others, or is it not safe? And then we have beliefs about money. Is there enough, or there never enough? So the reason I come back to that is beliefs are at the core of our identity. Our beliefs are going to shape how we talk to ourselves and about ourselves. They're going to shape what actions we do and do not take. That over a period of time becomes a habit. Habits influence our results, which shape our reality and our identity. So go ahead.
I was going to ask, what percent of people are on the positive side of all four of those beliefs?
There's always a deficiency. There's always an opportunity to upgrade or elevate a belief. Typically, what I find is we get somebody who's had a level of success and they're trying to push beyond to that next level. That's when doubt, uncertainty, and imposter syndrome come into the equation, because they start to have this or internal belief. Am I really capable? Do I really deserve this? Did I just get lucky? Was that a fluke? Did somebody else do all the work and I got all the credit? And that breeds uncertainty, indecision, and inaction.
And that even happens with highly successful people, correct?
Absolutely. I would say, like, on paper, the most successful individuals I work with, what we address most is fear of success, which sounds backwards. But at the end of the day, that fear of success is, if I keep going at this rate or I break through to that next impact or income level, more pressure, more responsibility, expectation, burden. I'm now responsible for more payroll, more mouths to feed. And sometimes that can be so overwhelming and consuming.
So, what does the new belief look like at that level?
So before the belief, it's creating a sense of safety. So, if somebody listening right now is like, I've taken my business to multiple seven figures. I want to get it to eight figures. Like, logically, they're saying all the right things. They think they really want it. They believe in their mission, their team. But as they get closer, literally on a physical nervous system and subconscious level, it doesn't feel safe. That level of success, because of the burden they've assigned to achieving it, feels so unsafe. Their mind gets crafty and creative and starts to deploy these destructive programs to get them back to what is comfortable, which is a lower level of success. So we've got to establish safety first, that on a physiological level, it's safe to embody and achieve that goal. And then from there, it's really doing the belief work around, I am worthy, I am deserving, I am capable, and in really eradicating any energy leaks or blind spots that might be incongruent with that.
What does that unsafety usually feel like? Like, if how would someone know that they were actually feeling unsafe in that particular moment?
Everybody's a bit different, but I'll give you some examples. So it could be that undercurrent of anxiety, which for most people shows up as a tension or tightness in the chest. It could be a heaviness or tightness in the neck, the upper back, shoulders. It could be that pain or physical sensation of ruminating, overthinking, my mind's moving a million miles an hour. There are physiological signs and symptoms. The mistake most people make, especially high performers, is they equate them to pressure and stress, and they wear them like a badge of honor. They take pride that they're on all of the time. They're stressed, they're locked in, but they've become obsessed or addicted from operating from stress, not addicted to winning. That cocktail of stress hormones has been flowing through their veins for so long. It's just simply all they know. And like we talked about earlier, inevitably that becomes a potent cocktail for burnout and emotional implosion.
And that was kind of my question is, do they really even feel it? Do they even notice it? Or is it such a normal state for them that it becomes their normal?
That is very accurate. It becomes their normal. So they are almost unaware of just how off track that might be or how unnecessary those feelings are. Yet, inevitably, at some point in their journey, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a comment from a friend, a mentor, a part of them is suddenly made aware like, maybe this is something I should look at. I should closely examine. Something piques their interest. And if they follow that, that's when they'll start to realize and increase that self-awareness of, the fact that I can't go to sleep at night and the fact that I'm glued to my phone and always on for my clients, maybe that's not congruent with who I say I want to be.
Do most people know who they want to be?
Most people think they know who they want to be, but their actions and their thoughts or their words are very incongruent. So I'll give you a common example. Most people, most entrepreneurs, leaders, CEOs, they'll say that they're family men and women, that their wife, their husband, their kids are most important. But all you have to do to really validate that is open their calendar. Is date night on their calendar? Is time with their children on their calendar? Is time for their self-care, the gym, massage, whatever it may be? Is that on their calendar? No, it's swamped with work meetings, networking events, this, that, and the other. So there's just a massive misalignment that's often present.
We always say the calendar and the checkbook shows what's really going on. You don't have to talk to the person. Just look at what their calendar says and where their money goes, and you'll have pretty good clarity of what their life actually is.
So true.
So what does the transformation look like?
Well, at its core, it is. So if I come back to this term I used earlier, this destructive mindset program, every day life is filled with triggers. It's not if we're going to be triggered, it's when we're going to be triggered. And what happens is when we're triggered, that's what detonates an emotion, and emotion then brings into play that filter, that lens, that belief we talked about that has the whole downstream effect. Where our opportunity for growth is being able to shift from a place of unconscious reaction to a place of conscious response. Now, the only difference, aside from the subtleties in my word choice, is that pause. That moment of pause in between that almost allows for that wave of emotion to wash over you, leave so you can come back online to your critical, logical, rational thinking, and then intentionally choose how you want to respond in a way that is in alignment with who you want to be. So we're working to diffuse and desensitize you from those triggers so that you can then take more deliberate, thoughtful, and intentional aligned action.
There's that whole, it makes sense to how it all comes to be. Do you run into issues where people struggle? In other words, they resist the change, or they don't fully let go enough for the change to occur, so to speak?
Oh, of course, because we have to remember, our identity encompasses our beliefs, our habits, our memories, our emotions. So anytime we're doing work to change or unlearn those, it's a real threat to our identity, which is life as we know it, all we know. And the subconscious is incredibly creative and crafty at putting up defense mechanisms, metaphorical and even literal walls at times to protect that identity of change from occurring. So fortunately, through thousands of coaching sessions and clients, I've got a pretty good arsenal of tools and tactics to work through and find other creative ways to bypass those defenses. And it's also just the power of any type of mentorship and accountability ridden relationship. Somebody who's truly committed to their growth has the understanding that he or she has blind spots and there are certain patterns or parts or characteristics that need to change to get to that next level. That's not suggesting it's easy just because you know it to be true, but that acceptance and awareness makes it easier because then you can understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
How do you know that you've gotten to the root cause of the habit? In other words, you were pretty good at when we were talking about your history with money, you've
Mhm.
examined it. A lot of people may not have done that. And so sometimes those true underlying causes are so buried, they might not even be aware of them themselves, or they might have forgotten, or their subconscious is so protective of it, it doesn't let anything in.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. They might not be aware. So I'm biased as a coach, but I believe coaching is the greatest gift you can give yourself because asking for help accelerates results. But in this context, what's unique about my work is it's very emotional. And what I mean by that is for me, when I can really begin to sense we're getting to that origin point of a learned belief or behavior, around money, for example, there's typically a very large emotional reaction when we are revisiting a memory. And what I mean by that is it could be a heavy flow of tears, massive bodily sensations, even a yelling, an outburst. That is a very clear sign because emotion literally means energy in motion. And that emotion has been stuck for so long. When we're able to unearth it and bring it to the surface, the floodgates open, metaphorically or literally, and that release creates an immediate sensation of lightness and ease, which then is reflected in future decision making around that very topic we've been working on.
So let's go back to poker, because one of the
Mm.
skills of poker is watching the table,
Mm-hmm.
right? Very close. Like you learn people's reactions, their little ticks, their
Oh,
little
yeah.
tells. How much of that are you using when you're watching people? Or does it even come into your practice to notice, like, oh, I see he just hid something, and catching those micro movements to say, I need to dig over there.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Are you asking how much of a benefit one of my poker playing clients might receive in that area?
No, I'm asking you how much you use that skill in working with your current clients to notice their particular ticks
Okay.
or
Yep.
holdbacks, or you saw they were going there and then they blocked up and you're like, oh, that one.
Tremendously reliance on that. And that's why all my coaching calls are video because I am watching the eye movement, the mouth movement, the facial expression, the body language. And I am known for asking very deep, intimate questions right off the bat to really demonstrate where and how far I'm willing to go to get the results this individual wants. And that non-verbal feedback is just as, if not more important than what it is that client says.
And I've watched coaches who are great at looking at the somatic, and it's incredible what they catch because they're
Yeah.
paying attention. And it's amazing how much people tell by the way they speak, and that, like,
Yeah.
because of the money side, I can always tell when someone's got money scripts, because you'll hear the little, you'll hear how they say it just under their breath. And it's like, oh, there's somebody with the money script. I can tell that I'm not as good as watching the human body, but I know that there are people, and certain, even actually without even talking to people, some people can watch how people move and so forth, and notice, hey, that person's carrying XYZ. They don't know
Yeah.
the cause, but they know there's something there in the root. So that's always been interesting to me.
Yeah, I can tell you, I had a coaching discovery call this morning. I have developed a skill because it's a challenge I personally overcame of recognizing when men in particular are emotionally constipated. They lack the emotional awareness, intelligence, the vernacular to articulate how they're feeling. Because I jokingly say, for the first 30 years of my life, I was emotionally constipated. I was even on the other end of the spectrum of toxic positivity. Everything was always fine. If there was a challenge, I didn't want to hear about it. Everything's great. Everything's great. But I can now see and hear it in the people I talk to. And I'm an avid note taker during these calls. And I'd already written on my calls, like, ask him more about emotional awareness. Can he label what he's feeling? And then at the end, towards the end of the call, he's like, I don't think I'm really aware of my emotions. And I was just smiling to myself, like, you don't say. Tell me more.
Well, we all get anger pretty well as guys, I think, because
Yes
it's
and
the
no.
other ones, right? Or no? Okay.
Yeah, not always, but that is the most universally acceptable one, if that's how we want to label it for men, unfortunately.
Yes, I've noticed that. What's an example of a deep, intimate question you would ask, like right off the bat?
I mean, how personal can we get? I might ask you to tell me about your sex life. I'll ask you a million money different questions.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's just it's more, it's not that the question is something, it's more that it's a question that goes deep into their belief system.
Bingo. Because even using,
Okay.
if we run with the example of sex, like, immediately there's going to usually be a physical reaction that I can sense and pick up something from, but it's a very good reflection or indicator of their communication skills, their closeness, their connection with their significant other. And the reason that's important to me is, this hard charging entrepreneur and high performer, a marriage or their significant other is the backbone of their success. And if there is strife there, it's going to show up in their business as well.
And they're going to take half of it when they get divorced.
Also true.
I come from the money angle. You got to protect it. That means you got to take care of your spouse. It's really that simple. And that's interesting. Out of curiosity, what subjects tend to be the ones that get the most visceral reaction? Because I've heard people will talk more about their sex life than their financial life.
What's childhood? And I know that's a little vague, but I unfortunately, a lot of people I work with have some very challenging, traumatic childhoods. And I've had people swear to me they've blocked out those memories. And as I've built that trust and that safe space in our coaching environment, and we start to peel back another layer, I mean, tears, yells, screams, all the above.
Is it that they didn't want to revisit it, they didn't want to admit it, they feel shamed by it? Like, what's the underlying?
Typically both. So what I've observed is primarily in men who have been victims of physical or sexual assault, there is a level of shame that is just so potent. And then, both men and women, sometimes it's just the complete avoidance of wanting to revisit it. It was so painful. It was so challenging. Like they've survived. Like, isn't that good enough? Why do I have to go revisit it again?
So why do they have to revisit it?
So inevitably, let's run with the example of a painful childhood. I'll use a client example. So a client of mine is the CEO of a big marketing agency, and additionally, the last few years, she started a nonprofit to match those in need with a kidney with donors, and she's trying to build partnerships with various medical facilities across the nation. Well, her childhood was composed of bouncing from one foster care home to the next. Unfortunately, at the vast majority of these homes, she was either physically, verbally, emotionally, or sexually abused. And more often than not, that came at the hands of a perceived powerful man. So she learned as a byproduct, in the presence of, again, perceived powerful men, very subjective, that she needed to play small, not speak up, not voice her opinions. And she began to learn to shut down in these environments as a literal way to protect herself. That was a survival mechanism that helped her. That literally probably saved her life in some instances. When we fast forward decades later, and the way that she's raising capital for her nonprofit is entering the rooms of perceived powerful, wealthy men to pitch them in this idea. And early on in this startup phase, she's stumbling over her words. She can't clearly articulate her vision. She's a shell of herself. And she described it as feeling as if she just dissociated in those boardrooms, which is exactly what she did when she was younger, the victim of all of these terrible scenarios. So in her case, we had to go back and we had to reestablish a sense of safety, almost save and metaphorically protect that little girl, empower her with that confidence, that courage, those tools. And although we're going in the past to do this work, it has a significant positive ripple effect into the present, where we look years later today, that nonprofit is thriving with partnerships with some of the biggest medical clinics in the nation. And it's because of her leadership, confidence, and communication skills.
And I'm guessing she didn't realize that. And that's probably true of most people. They don't really realize the underlying beliefs.
Yeah, they're
that are
buried.
holding. I'm guessing, but most of the underlying beliefs are actually built in childhood. Do you know, is there a certain age range you've noticed, or is that not the case?
It definitely is. I mean, researchers estimate by the age of 7, 95% of our beliefs are formed. So there's definitely that. And we're most malleable and open to suggestibility those first 7 years and even into teenage years. But it could also be something as traumatic as at age 35 or 45, going through going through with a divorce. Like your whole identity in life is built on this one thing. Suddenly it's ripped to shreds and it's no longer your reality. You've got to rebuild. And, we see it all the time. Like, I'm afraid to go find love again. Or maybe your business failed. I'm afraid to go start a new one because I have this belief I'm just going to fail again. I'm a failure. I'm not worthy. And you only use that one piece of evidence to validate your story, even though you might have a dozen other pieces of evidence to suggest otherwise.
Is there usually an underlying story of that story, or is it usually just the standalone of that story? Meaning, is there
Definitely
something
could
much
be.
deeper?
More often than not, there is. But I've
Okay.
had a couple clients that have had just some one off, atypical, terrible, challenging experiences professionally or personally. And it's almost just like, okay, that really sucks. I can see how you began to react, believe, and behave a certain way because of that. We got to dig into that. We got to take the learning lessons, do the reframing and the healing, and move forward.
How long does it usually take through the process?
Tough question to answer concisely. I never want to overpromise, underdeliver. But
No,
I can tell you
you
this.
give
Like,
us a range.
my clients can have a massive breakthrough after the very first call. We all have different degrees and sizes of these big blocks or these big instances that we need to unlearn and let go of. And a great analogy I'll borrow from my mentor is, if we are all born perfect squares, and the goal in life, self actualization, our best self, is to become a perfect sphere. Life is all about sanding those rough edges until we become a sphere. Some of us have much rougher, sharper edges than others. And typically, when someone comes to work with me, Rocky, and they're really at their own rock bottom, they're going to experience a fast, massive breakthrough because they're so consumed by emotion, so in a bad place, that we have so much opportunity that even a 1 degree shift is exponentially better to where they are. And typically, in a 6 month time frame, we might have a couple calls that are just massive emotional reactions. Then we might enter a phase of 3 or 4 calls where it's a bit more fine tuning and smoothing of those edges. And then one might pop up again where, oh my goodness, it's another massive one. And it's kind of an undulating pattern.
Do you notice most people wait too long?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I'm
always
guilty
wonder.
of it too sometimes. Yeah. We're stubborn. We think we can do it ourselves. We think we don't need help.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there a question I should have asked, but I didn't? Or something you wanted to share, but didn't get a chance to?
I think these are some of the best questions I've been asked. I appreciate them.
Well, I'm glad I could do that. Now, you also run a business, and within your business, you use Profit First. What brought you to that?
I started using Profit First. Wow, almost probably 8 years ago. That's pretty cool to say out loud. Wow. I realized at one point in my life, I had $30,000 just sitting in a Bank of America savings account. And I knew something was wrong with that, but I didn't know what was wrong with that. So it's probably actually like 10 or 11 years ago, now that I'm thinking about it. Long story short, that was the catalyst to kind of my financial literacy journey. And that's when I learned about, retirements and getting a financial planner to work for me. And it was through that process, as an entrepreneur, I had great months, I had not so great months, and I had mediocre months. And I didn't like having the unpredictability. That gave me more angst and anxiety. So I stumbled across Profit First as really a system to help me maintain a semblance of predictability, even though I had to weather the inevitable storms of bigger months and smaller months. So that's what drew me to it. It works so well in my profession that I actually use the same framework, about probably 90% similar in my personal finances as well.
I went the opposite way. I always used it in my personal finances long before Profit First was written, because Mike
Interesting.
basically took personal finance principles and applied it to business owners, switching it from the old days. It was envelopes and jars of money, and
Yeah.
then it became bank accounts, because for business owners it's bank accounts, and it does solve a lot of the emotional problems with money. And even for me, I find it's funny because I have very large tax bills. And I hate paying taxes. But I will go to my tax account and I will see that there is more than enough money to pay the taxes. So I feel okay stroking the check. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, that hurt, but whatever. The money was there.
Yeah.
It wasn't part of my normal account. And so it keeps it that way. The other thing it does is it tells me when I'm spending too much in the business. And my
Mm.
spending in the business is all extravagance, and so I know that. And it tells me, hey, you're a little too extravagant. Cut it back. I'm like, okay, yes, I'll cut it back. And then I'll be extravagant again in a
Oh.
while. But it keeps me contained and constrained and helps me with keep the emotional things around money very well controlled. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
It's harder to sustain than you think. And what got you there won't keep you there.
I agree with your last part of that statement, but why is it harder to sustain?
Well, a couple things come into mind. In fact, this is so timely. I just got off a podcast recording with someone. We talked about this. So it depends now on your profession, your domain, how you're making your money. But inevitably, what happens is this form of what's called expert amnesia. Like we get so lost in what we do, we get so incredibly lost in the success, the results, that a couple things begin to happen. Number one, there's almost like a form of overconfidence that develops that leads to finding ease and taking shortcuts and cutting corners. And number two, what we give a lot of attention and time on in the beginning to create that success, for whatever reason, we start to see it as less and less important.
A very slight veer off of center and you end up in a very different place. What's a lesson that cost you a lot but was worth every penny?
I hired a coach, or so I thought. That's a good intro to the story, right? Who I paid $50,000 for somebody to coach me, a multiple seven-figure owner, operator, blah, blah, blah. He was a horrible coach, but he taught me one thing. He taught me how to sell. And it took me a while to learn that he was a great teacher and not a great coach. And I was looking for a coach. And I think there's a big difference. But he taught me how to sell. And that led to me learning how to 5x, 10x my prices and get that money back in no time.
Out of curiosity, what do you see as the difference between a coach and a teacher?
So a coach definitely has to be able to teach, but a coach is very good at not only the accountability aspect of, getting you to actually execute what you say you will and need to do, but a coach is incredibly skilled at A, asking questions, and B, leading an intimate conversation in a safe space to help, if I'm coaching you, I don't want to just tell you the answers. I want to help you get to those answers on your own, because that then gives you a sense of ownership. It's empowering and it's inspiring. So as a coach, I want to help you. I'm your mirror. I want to reflect back to you so you can see your blind spots or your faults in thinking. Whereas a teacher is just going to cram A to Z all of the information they can in a particular subject down your throat and just hope and pray that you'll execute.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Last question. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Read 10 pages of a nonfiction book every day. Go read. There are so many wise, smart, incredible people who have distilled their life's work into 200 or 300 pages, and that'll save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, consistent heartache, and countless mistakes.
I find it funny. A lot of people want to learn from their own mistakes instead of learning from other people's. And God bless them. I choose to take the easy path. That's just me. If people would like to learn more about you, your services, connect, how do they do that?
Yes. So I host the Unstuck High Performer podcast. If what I shared today was of value, it resonated, you can find 2 new episodes every week there, Apple, Spotify, all major platforms. And then on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Paul Salter.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. This was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for checking out the full unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can get the full audio podcast with intro, outro, and a ton more details here on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Don't forget, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to go back through, and you can also get episode information on the Richer Soul website as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you're automatically updated as to what's going on and every time we release a new episode. The first few episodes of the Richer Soul podcast actually lay out the entire framework that everything is built on over all of these years. So check them out as well. Thanks for listening.